Morning. Actually, afternoon. My goodness, I've been off all week this week, and as I listen to the rain pouring down, it's not helping me to think any clearer. So I apologize for that. But welcome to our third webinar in our COVID series. Today, we are going to be talking about how do I prevent being sued from someone saying that they got COVID at my insurance agency. So just a few housekeeping notes before we kick off with our special guest speaker today. If you missed the other webinars that we have done, they are all recorded and they are on my O'Connor Insurance YouTube channel. I will also be sending the link for this recording to you after the presentation and the handout of the PowerPoint slide, which actually today we don't have a whole lot of slides because we're really going to enjoy our speaker and hear from her. So there's not a whole lot of slides to share. If there's any information on any of the other recordings that you would like, don't hesitate to hit me back. I'm happy to share anything with you that I have and that I've shown the group that we've prepared in the form of processes and procedures and all kinds of good things in getting ready for this. So the format of the presentation is that we will hear from our guest speaker for about 20-25 minutes. If you think of a question for her or for me during the presentation, don't hesitate to use your chat box. I have it set so I'm the only one that can see the questions, so you don't have to worry about it broadcasting out to everyone. I know that's always a fear when you're in these Zoom meetings, so I just want to make sure everybody knows that. And then I'll go over the questions. I'll double check them at the end and make sure that we've answered all of them. So that everyone gets their questions taken care of today. The questions are also, it can be anonymous as well if you don't want me to know your name for some reason. So before we get started, I love a good poll. So I am going to do our first poll. Let's see here. And I've just launched it. If you will answer it for me, are you worried about an employee saying that he or she got COVID at your agency and suing you? So if you'll go ahead and answer that question off the bat. I always like seeing where everybody's at with this. I think it's good for us to know where we're all coming in from. So, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and close the poll and I will share the results so you can see it. It looks like most of you are not worried about employees. So that makes me think that you are worried about your clients and or vendors, carrier partners coming into the agency. So without further ado, I am going to introduce our guest speaker to you today. Her name is Kelly Rains Jesson, and she is a partner at Jesson Rains. So Kelly's focus is on real estate planning, probate administration, and business law. Just a couple of highlights for her career. She was named to the North Carolina Rising Star list by Super Lawyers for estate planning in 2018, 2019, and 2020. The Rising Star list is reserved for the top 2.5% of attorneys age 40 or under who have been practicing for 10 years or less. Prior to joining Jesson Rains, Kelly represented local governments and businesses in matters ranging from personal injury suits in state court to discrimination, policy liability, and other constitutional law claims in federal court. So Kelly is a retired litigator. So I am super excited to have her with us today, and I am going to unmute her and welcome her to the webinar today. Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this.
So why don't you go ahead and kick us off by starting the conversation about how we can prevent someone from saying that they got COVID in our insurance agency and suing us.
So this is kind of a trick question because I like to tell my clients that there is absolutely nothing you can do to 100% bulletproof yourself from getting sued. Because there are always people out there who are going to file lawsuits, and there's nothing stopping, someone from walking into a courthouse and filing a meritless claim. Anybody can file a lawsuit. So what we try to do as far as protecting our clients is put things in place to prevent that client from being ordered to pay damages. It's great if we can get the case dismissed before it ever would get to a jury, but the main goal is to prevent our client from having to pay money. And
well, as you know, as insurance agents, we are used to baseless claims.
right.
Both from our clients and then of course our professional liability. There's only, we can just prepare ourselves in the instance that it happens and have the documentation ready. So that makes good sense.
Right, of course. And, whenever, if you've got a client, if we have a business client who has insurance coverage for claims, which they should all have, then, if an attorney takes over, we're of course going to try to get the lawsuit thrown out as quickly as possible. But when it comes to some of the personal injury, which, COVID would be, getting sick, sometimes it's comes down to questions of reasonableness and not a legal question that a judge can decide and throw the case out. And so it may get to the point where there's got to be a factual determination of whether or not someone was negligent. So when we're talking about these personal injury suits or damages related to getting COVID, the question is going to be, was the employer or the business owner, if we're talking about a guest, negligent? And negligence is not using reasonable care.
So who's going to determine reasonable care in our offices?
Yeah, great question. So, what reasonable care is it doesn't have a great definition. It's not this is what reasonable care is, and everybody knows what it is, and these are the 10 things that you've got to do. Especially with something like this, for most people who are alive now have not had to deal with something like this before. So this is a new thing for all of us. So what's going to be reasonable and not reasonable is going to be, questionable now, subject to interpretation. Everyone's going to have a different opinion about it. But in terms of a lawsuit, reasonable care is a standard of care. What would a normal person do in a similar circumstance? So a business owner in a similar circumstance, and it's based off of foreseeability of an injury, right? Mm-hmm. So if you are hearing from our government officials and medical officials that you need to stay 6 feet away from each other to avoid spreading this disease, then it would be foreseeable that someone would catch it from another employee if they're standing shoulder to shoulder at a food processing plant, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to look at the circumstances and use the foreseeability standard, and then adjust your behavior based on what you know. And I know that changes sometimes. And so I would argue that business owners have a duty to stay informed of what is going on. So if, the CDC or somebody else comes out in 2 weeks and says, this is what we've just learned, now we can do this, this. I mean, then we need to pay attention to that, and we need to adjust our behavior accordingly so we can keep our employees safe and our guests safe.
Well, that's a very good point, because this environment has just changed constantly. In the initial portion of it, they told us we didn't need to wear masks. Then when they said we did need to wear masks, the temperature check thing seems to have come and gone. Sometimes I hear that as being an important point, and other times it's not an important point. So it's very difficult to know. And eventually, most of us would like to get back to having our offices open to the public and being able to at least have appointments with our clients, which I know you're in the same boat as that. And so what does that look like so that we can both protect our employees and protect the guests that are coming and going on both sides of it? So,
Right.
Currently we've discussed masks in our common spaces for everyone. Our agency has disposable masks available. We have only vendors that are allowed in our office right now. And so we've also made a vendor protocol, and I have an employee who's responsible for enforcing it, who's sweet but tough. So she'll make sure they're not allowed in.
Right.
So those are kinds of the things that we're talking about right now. So how about the surfaces? How can you can take reasonable care and you can wipe your surfaces after each time someone's in there, but it's not foolproof. You're still
Right.
There still could be those possibilities.
Right. Well, I mean, the great thing about this negligence standard of care, which remind me to mention to you that even that is, we might even have a little bit more of a break than just the negligence standard of care. Don't let me forget. But the good thing about that is that it's not the same as being an absolute ensure that no one is ever going to get sick, right?
Okay.
The law does not require you to do everything you possibly can and go beyond the bounds of reason to try to keep people from getting sick. Your responsibility is to be reasonable and use reasonable precautions. The problem is we don't know what that means, right?
Right.
But we can rely on things as guidance. And so, Governor Cooper's stay-at-home order, provides guidance there. Frequent hand washing, wiping down surfaces, staying 6 feet away from one another, wearing masks, things like that. So, it's really using kind of your common sense. Whenever you have, if you're not having people in your office on a regular basis, when you have someone new come in and they leave, wipe the stuff down that they touched.
Sure.
That's not unreasonable for us, for a lot of people who own insurance agencies. That's not going to be hard. And you see some of these big companies on the news. Walmart's been sued. Amazon's been sued. For them to disinfect an entire store, an entire plant routinely is really difficult. It's not hard for us to get a Clorox wipe and wipe some stuff down. So we're in a much better boat. It's completely dependent upon the circumstances as well, which is why this is also a question of fact. That is it reasonable or not reasonable? There's no black and white answer. What might be entirely reasonable for me might be completely unreasonable for Amazon. So that's why it's a tricky question that doesn't have a clear-cut answer.
Well, thank you for saying that. The next thing that came to my mind was that this could be a very slippery slope between, now we're talking about COVID. Are we going to be talking about the flu next month, or I guess in October, November, when that starts coming up? Is this going to set precedents for our businesses that is going to be unreasonable for us to keep up with? How reasonable are we going to be able to keep up with that? We can't prevent our office from passing the flu around,
right?
Unless we stay 6 feet away from each other at all times, which perhaps that's the environment we may end up in. Yeah.
And that's a really great question. And I don't have an answer for it. And, this is more contagious. I think everyone will agree this is more contagious, and it does more harm to certain populations. But you're right, well, fine, but the flu kills more people than, the common cold. So we need to protect against the flu, but not the cold. It is a slippery slope. And you've heard people talk about, coming to work sick. Before this all happened, I mean, a lot of employers would discourage people from coming to work sick, but I don't know how many people got sent home, and I'm going to be thinking twice about that now. If I've got an employee coming in sick, I might actually force them to leave.
I'm with you 100%. We had a cold go through our office earlier this year. Everybody got it pretty hard, and it seemed like we all got it at various stages. And so you're absolutely right. At that point, I had to ask everyone, if you're sick, to please stay home. I don't want you coming to the office to cough. We have remote capabilities, just please go ahead and stay home. It's fine if you don't want to take PTO. If you're capable of working, that's all right. Just don't cough all over us. But you're right. There was a couple folks that I thought, I really should have sent her home. She really couldn't stop coughing. I should have asked her to go ahead and go home. So I think it's a fine line for our employees, because they're afraid of disappointing us or upsetting us, or they know we're short-staffed already. So it's one of those times where, as owners, we're going to have to exercise just a greater degree of flexibility, and our staff hopefully will be forthcoming with us. We've got a great team at our agency, so I'm not concerned about that. But you don't have to worry about those kinds of things, hopefully.
And another point about that, with now moving forward, everybody has a good idea of how to work remotely. And so I think there will be less expectations for people, if they are in fact sick. I have the ability to work remotely, so I know it's okay to talk to my employer about that, and they allow me to work from home. I'm hoping, there's a lot of bad stuff going on right now, but there will be some good to come out of this too. And I think, some flexibility in working is going to be one of those things.
It's a really interesting line for an employer. Prior to this whole mess, I had done a lot of research on remote working, because I had one team member that wanted to, but she was local. And I also have another team member who is now permanently remote. And so just trying to get a feel for how I feel about that as an employer. One of the things that I'm just missing right now, though, is the team atmosphere, because, it's not as easy to just buzz by somebody's office and say, how was your weekend? Or how's it coming on that house sale? Or, just the normal things. So I think that is missing. And so technology is wonderful. We've used all of it. We're using all of the video stuff, but you can't replicate that just bumping into you while you're grabbing a Coke and saying, hey, how'd this go, or how'd that go?
Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to mention during this call, since we've been talking about negligence so much, is that was it last week or the week before? Governor Cooper signed the North Carolina law, kind of the equivalent of the CARES Act, but it's North Carolina. Lots of money, putting some stuff in place, emergency things. One of the statutes that was included in that emergency law is applies to businesses that were deemed essential under Governor Cooper's order. Now, I know that Mecklenburg County had its own order. It doesn't apply to those businesses, but the good news is that almost all of the businesses that were in the Mecklenburg County order were also essential in Governor Cooper's order, if that makes sense.
Yes.
But it's just referring to Governor Cooper's order. So anyway, businesses that were deemed essential under Governor Cooper's order, if an employee or someone in contact with that business gets COVID-19 as a result of working or doing business with that business, that the employer or the business owner is not liable for damages unless they are found to be grossly negligent.
Well, that's very good news for insurance agents, because we were essential under both.
Right.
And that's what we spent the other webinars discussing, is how to prepare our agencies to make sure that everyone stays healthy.
Yeah. So I don't think that this really needs to change the way that anybody does anything. Okay. This doesn't mean suddenly, I don't have to do my standard of care. That is actually more likely to get you into trouble, because gross negligence is the intentional ignoring of these standards of care. So a conscious disregard for reasonable care. So if you know that hand washing and mask and stuff like that are what you need to do, and you don't put any of those processes in place, that's going to be, in my opinion, a conscious disregard for those systems. So it's not like, oh, I'm essential, I don't have to do any of this stuff. No, you still have to do it. The difference is that if you put these things in place, more than likely you are not going to be held to pay damages, because you did reasonable care. You put systems in place. If you completely ignore it, then you may be grossly negligent for completely ignoring it.
Well, that's a very good point. Thank you for sharing that. I do have another question from something that you had sent out in one of your blogs too, Kelly. We talked about the Fmla a little bit last time on our webinar with the HR consultant that we had on board. And one of the questions, of course, that she wasn't equipped to answer is how you get deemed it to be a hardship on your business. And I know you had put some information out about that and what North Carolina's standard was anyway.
Gosh, you caught me off guard with this.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I think I have the answer right behind me. Hold on a second.
I was going to say, otherwise, I'll be happy to send out your blog article. I know it was very informative.
So
speaking of which, if you'd like to get Kelly's blogs, you can jump on her website and sign up for them. She does an amazing job of highlighting really important things, especially right now with Governor Cooper signing orders and things. Kelly has really provided a lot that we've shared with our business owners about things that are going on and how to make things easier to do business for them.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if anybody's interested, we don't spam, we don't sell, we put articles out once or twice a week, tops. We write them ourselves. It's all stuff that we think the business owners would want to know. So I did find it. The FMLA emergency rule scared the heck out of everybody, because normally that doesn't apply to small businesses, and suddenly it does. And the law had this little line in there that said that the Department of Labor can issue regulations exempting certain small businesses. And then that was it. And the Department of Labor is not going to, stay up all night and put something together. So of course it took them a while. So like 30 days later, they issue this. So the exemption regulation. This is the emergency FMLA was for employers to make partial payments to employees who have to stay home with kids because the school's out or whatever. And so there is an exemption. It's not a small business exemption anymore. It's not just the business. It is an employee by employee determination. So a small business owner can deny emergency FMLA to an employee if such leave would cause the small business's expenses and financial obligations to exceed available business revenue and cause the small business to cease operating at a minimal capacity, or, sorry, this is long, the absence of the employee or employees requesting such leave would pose a substantial risk to the financial health or operational capacity of the small business because of the employee's specialized skills, knowledge, or responsibilities, or there are not enough workers who are available, able, willing, or qualified to perform the labor and services. It's applied per employee. The employer does not need to send anything to the Department of Labor if it chooses to exercise the exemption. It needs only to keep records of the approval and denial to support its decision. I think they got it right here. It's not a blanket small business exemption. Like, oh, my business, I can't pay my employees. Is this employee so integral to my business that my business is going to go under if this happens? Or I only have 2 employees, and if both of them are out, my business is going to go under, if I'm still paying them. So that's that.
Well, and the potentially slippery slope I see there, and looking at my own organization, there's 6 of us. total. I've
Mhm.
got 2 who would be considered to be key in commercial and 2 who would be considered to be key in personal. If one in either one of those departments was granted the FMLA by us, but then the second one needed to exercise it, then, you know, it would essentially, or could essentially put us out of business without the support
Right.
for that department. So that's a hard one too. So I guess we're going to have to be very careful as owners to exercise it fairly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because they say, you know, well, don't submit anything to us, just keep records. Well, that's pretty much like keep records, wait and see if you're sued, wait and see if you're audited, and then prove that you're right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But anyway, I think they've just got so many more big fish to fry right now. But who knows? Who knows?
Well, I would tell all of my agent friends that are listening to apply it consistently, so it may be something that you want to put thought into now, which Kim had also suggested last week as well. You know, a lot of these things you need to know how you're going to react if and when an employee comes to you and asks to exercise that. So I would just put forth that you should put some thought into that and maybe put some notes down. You know, maybe they're just secret notes in your own notebook for right now, but, you know, at some point putting together your own procedure for how you're going to handle it if somebody comes and asks to exercise that.
Mm-hmm.
I had heard unofficially, completely rumor at this time, that the schools may not open in the fall. And so, excuse me, they're going to open, but they're going to open remotely. So
Right.
I've been told that by a couple of different teachers in different districts. Even in Mecklenburg, I have heard that as well. So we have to be prepared as business owners how we're going to react to that with our staff. Again, exercising additional flexibility, so that maybe we don't force them to have to take the FMLA to go out permanently. So that may
Right. And that's a great point. They don't get FMLA if they can work remotely.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So that's only if they can't work remotely. If they have to stay home with a child and can't still work.
Mm-hmm.
So that, you know, it would behoove an employer to make sure that they can get this remote access video and all of that to employees so they can continue to work.
Definitely. Well, Kelly, I can't thank you enough. Your insight is invaluable. I love your blogs. You do a wonderful job of breaking it down in English so that everyone can understand. And you're very factual and you're short and sweet and to the point, which I really appreciate in the blog messages. But thank you so much for joining us today. And Kelly teed up the next webinar perfectly. So
I didn't even know.
Next Wednesday, we did not plan that. Next Wednesday, we're going to talk about how COVID and this crisis has changed how we do business and how is it going to change moving forward for us. So if you were like us, we hastily made a decision, you know, before about March 13th-ish to put our employees into a remote work environment. We knew that was the safest choice at the time. We did it very quickly. We had remote capabilities available, but you know, at the time I thought, oh, this is going to be 2 weeks and we'll be back in the office. So sniffle, sniffle, here we are 8 weeks later, and potential for a lot longer. So that has me rethinking how I'm going to retool my workforce so that if they do in fact need to be remote again for any kind of permanent basis, that we have the system set up just a tiny bit different. I was pleased with a lot of things and there's some other things I want to make improvements on. So I want to share that information with you all and then, you know, just talk about how the agency of the future is going to look and operate. How do we get that feel of, you know, hey, Kelly, how was your weekend when we're working in a remote environment and doing Zoom meetings instead? And even if we're lucky enough to get back into the office, not being able to congregate and talk is, you know, killing me to the point where I've stayed out of my own office because I can't get close to my folks and chat with them. Then I'm better off staying in video. Those of you that know me know that I'm touchy, so it's a bad thing for me. I have to constantly remind myself to take 2 steps back so that I'm more than 6 feet away. So when I lean in, that I'm just in the 6 feet zone. So I can't thank you all enough for joining us today. I do not see any questions on our chat, but if you think of any at the end, by all means, shoot them over to me. I'll get up with Kelly and we will get the answers out to everyone. I mentioned everything is recorded that we are doing. I am, it takes me a little while afterwards to get it up onto our YouTube, but I typically have it done by the end of the day. It is not uber professional. It is just me in a little editing software that I edit out any, horrible bloopers, but for the most part, I've maintained the contact as it is. Feel free to share the links with any agency owners that you know. I'll also have the link in for the webinar for next week, and I would love for you to join us. So thanks again. Thank you, Kelly, and I hope everyone has a great rainy day.
Bye.